Ambition is a uniquely human trait. It's not just the desire to survive, but the drive to thrive and be more than you currently are. On the one hand, it's capable of propelling people to greatness, but on the other, it can steer them into disaster. It's that little voice in your head that says, you could be more. You deserve it. For some, ambition is a ladder. For others, it's a trapdoor. It has built empires and burned them down just as quickly. When wielded with discipline, ambition becomes the backbone of legends, but left unchecked, it can curdle into hubris. In Batman the Animated Series, few characters embody this paradox more tragically and hilariously than Sid the Squid. It's worth mentioning that there are actually two Sid the Squids in BTAS. One was the alias of protection racketeer Tony Zuko, who killed Robin's parents, but he's not who I'm talking about. No, I'm talking about Sidney Debris, a low-level crook whose modest ambition to be a respected underworld figure accidentally crowns him the new king of Gotham, if only for a day. Through a series of absurd misunderstandings, Sid finds himself credited with killing Batman, and the city's gangland elite suddenly take him very seriously. But Sid's rise is a cosmic joke at his expense. It's very much a case of be careful what you wish for. Sid the Squid is an original character created for Batman the Animated Series by writer Paul Dini. Those with an encyclopedic knowledge of Batman villains may be quick to point out that there is a Batman villain with a similar name, the Squid, but I don't believe he was a direct inspiration for Sid. The Squid was supposed to be a menacing criminal mastermind, but he was a bit of a joke. Okay, so far so similar, but hear me out. He wore brightly coloured clothes and had a bit of a speech impediment that made it very hard to take him seriously with his whittle schemes. He's notable for being the criminal boss that brought Killer Croc to Gotham, although after he failed to defeat Batman, the Squid lost Croc's confidence. The two argued and in the end Croc assassinated the Squid, unceremoniously sniping him from a rooftop. While it's possible Debris was inspired by the Squid, I'm not convinced that he was a major influence. Firstly, his real name was Clement Karp, not Sidney, and aside from their criminal aspirations, the only thing they really have in common is the fact that they identified with the same animal. But in Sid's case, it's a joke. Mere window dressing to make him sound menacing when he demonstrably isn't. It's not like he wore a squid-themed costume or kept a man-eating mollusk as a pet, like the comic book original had. It may shock you to hear this, but I'm not Paul Dini, nor am I psychic, so I can't say with 100% certainty what inspired him, but given Sid's obsession with becoming a big-time gangster, I see a lot of Ray Liotta's Henry Hill from Goodfellas in him, just through a more comical lens. If you've never seen the film, shame on you, it's one of Scorsese's best. The film revolves around the life of gangster Henry Hill, and his rise through the New York crime families from wannabe to real deal. He starts out fairly low level, involved in thefts and assault, moving on to becoming a drug kingpin, before eventually becoming an informant and being placed in witness protection, doomed to live the rest of his life in suburban normalcy. And when we're first introduced to Sid the Squid, he's in a similar position to Henry. He begs his friend Eddie G to allow him to accompany him on a drug run for crime boss Rupert Thorne. Eddie is more what you might expect when you think of a gangster, tall, well-groomed in a sharp suit and not afraid of violence. Sid, meanwhile, to put it charitably, is not. There are a couple of things about Sid's character design that I really enjoy. His character model is very cartoony and he has some delightfully exaggerated expressions. He very intentionally doesn't fit in with the rest of the world. As absurd as Sid looks, at least he's persistent. So Eddie sets Sid up as the lookout. Read that as bait for Batman. Now that he feels like one of the boys, Sid asks Eddie to come up with a suitably menacing nickname for him, and he settles on Sid the Squid, inspired by a nearby sign for the Coburn Calamari Company. A fun fact about this company is that it was named after Avery Coburn, who was the network's broadcast standards and practices head, basically the TV censor. She is easily an unsung hero of Batman the Animated Series because she understood the creative team's desire to push boundaries, and she enabled them as best she could. Also, not to flex, but I actually own the original John Calmette painting of this sign. It's one of my precious treasures. With his new identity, Sid passes the time by fluffing himself up, talking about what a devious criminal mastermind he is and how he's destined for the big time, just as Batman arrives. Usually someone as diminutive as Sid wouldn't be a problem for Batman. He could probably knock him out with a hard enough stare, but Sid has a very unusual ability. He is incredibly clumsy. so much so that he almost killed himself by falling over the edge of the rooftop. As we all know, Batman values human life, even the lives of criminal scumbags, and in his attempts at saving the scrambling Sid, Batman falls over the edge and is engulfed by an exploding fuel tank. The real joke about this situation is that from the ground level, where Eddie and the other gangsters are, it looks like Sid has lunged at Batman to attack him. As such, they hail him as the man who killed Batman. Now, of course, we all know that Batman isn't really dead. No, instead he goes into hiding so that he can watch Sid and his fellow gangsters to find out who the mastermind behind the drug smuggling operation really is. But by allowing the world to think that he has been killed, Batman places Sid in danger. While Sid was initially remorseful, he very quickly changes his tune once he sees the adulation his peers lay on him. Fame and admiration do have their downside, however, as other criminals start to think about how their own reputations could be enhanced by killing the man who killed Batman. Now, suddenly, Sid starts to rethink his life choices. The reaction to the news that Batman has died is pretty interesting too. Harvey Bullock, who had often been presented as a foil to Batman, is crestfallen and regretfully tells Montoya the bad news. Understandably, the commissioner is very upset and Montoya has to excuse herself. Bullock, meanwhile, does what comes naturally to him. He makes threats of violence towards the jailed gangsters. They are going to tell him everything they know about this mysterious new criminal mastermind. It's at this point that a lawyer, Harleen Quinzel, intervenes to pay Sid's bail. Her name doesn't ring any bells immediately, but Sid soon realizes that he has been freed by the Joker, which is not a good thing. Joker had always assumed that he would one day kill Batman, so when he hears that a classless lowly grunted off the bat, well, he finds it very hard to believe. In order to prove Sid wrong, Joker kidnaps him and forces him to tag along to a jewelry store robbery, but Batman doesn't show up. There was a certain routine that the two had. The Joker would cause trouble, Batman would show up, the pair would match wits, Batman would usually win, and the Joker would go back to Arkham where he'd start working on planning their next encounter. But Sid has ruined his fun. There's no Batman anymore, so there's no point in stealing the jewels. Instead, he stages a funeral for Batman at the Ace Chemical plant, the place where Hitman Jack Napier, as he was calling himself at the time, became the Joker after a fateful dunk in a tank of acid. This is easily one of the best Joker scenes across all media, as the Joker eulogizes Batman and caps the whole thing off by locking Sid in a coffin, which is then dunked in the tank of acid. Yet somehow, Sid miraculously escaped. He believes that the pipes feed into the river and the force of the coffin hitting the riverbanks broke him free. But in reality, it was Batman. With nowhere else to turn, Sid goes to the only person he can think of that will be able to protect him, Rupert Thorne. However, after hearing his story, Thorne simply cannot believe that Sid is that lucky or that stupid, despite his protests to the contrary, and Thorne attempts to murder him, believing him to be a tricky rival trying to seize power from him. And it's at this point that Batman strikes. To be honest, if I was Batman and I was investigating a drug smuggling operation in Gotham, I'd probably assume that Rupert Thorne was behind it all, but I guess Batman needed to have his suspicions confirmed. For as helpful as Sid has been, he was at the end of the day a criminal, so Batman's moral code couldn't allow him to go free. But he argued that if handled correctly, this could be a big opportunity for Sid. For as much torture as Sid endured through the episode, he gets his happy ending as he's sent to Stonegate Penitentiary. Here, he's welcomed with cheers from the other inmates who call him the toughest man in Gotham who nearly off the bat set up Thorne and made a fool out of the Joker. He is a big shot at last. Sid only appeared in a single episode of Batman the Animated Series, but fans who read the spin-off comic Batman The Adventures Continue may have spotted him during the Red Hood storyline. Written by Paul Dini and Alan Burnett, this continuation introduced Jason Todd to the DCAU continuity as the secret Robin who operated in the gap between Dick Grayson's departure and Tim Drake's arrival. Much like his mainline comic book counterpart, Todd was a hothead, too rough with Gotham's rogues. But he picked the wrong fight with the Joker and Harley. When Todd disappeared, Batman left no stone unturned in his search, even briefly crossing paths with Sid the Squid, now a reluctant informant. It's a brief cameo, but one that neatly completes the Henry Hill arc, from wannabe gangster to weary stool pigeon. I know many don't consider the comic strictly canon, but my rule is simple. If it's set in the DCAU and worked on by the original creative team, it counts, even if you have to squint a little bit to make it all fit. Sid the Squid is a perfect case study in Gotham's tragic arithmetic. Wanting more usually gets you less, He stumbles into greatness not through cunning or cruelty, but by sheer, improbable accident. And in doing so, he exposes the fragile egos of the criminal elites, the theatrical grief of Batman's foes, and the empty promise of underworld ambition. Everyone wants to be king. Not many know what to do with the crown once it's on their head. And yet there's something oddly triumphant about Sid's ending. He gets everything he ever wanted: respect, recognition, a legend with his name on it, even if it's built on a foundation of misunderstanding. It's not real power, but in a place like Stonegate, it's real enough. In a world where villains are often destroyed by their own ambition, Sid survives his, and that alone makes him exceptional.
Okay, that's it for this week's essay. If you liked the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell all your friends about me. You know how YouTube works. If you really enjoyed the video and have the means, please consider making use of the thanks button to send $1 or $2 my way, because every little helps. I offer channel memberships for $1.99 a month. This will get you early access to my weekly video essay, priority responses to your comments, members-only videos, custom emojis, and an icon on your profile indicating that you're one of my people. And special thanks to my channel members. Everyone who was a member at the time of this video's creation is listed on the screen right now. If you want to see your name amongst all these wonderful people, join the channel now.
Next time, I'll be back on Monday to look at what I think is the absolute best episode of the new Batman adventures. Yes, I want to talk about the doomed love story that is Growing Pains. And next Friday, I want to talk about the sad story of a beloved Silver Age of comics figure who is about to be brought into the spotlight thanks to James Gunn's Superman film. How's that for a bit of synergy? Yes, it's time to uncover the forgotten story of the DC Animated Universe's version of Krypto, the Superdog. Hope to see you then.